Hey friends, SGT here, and I have Woody O'Brien back on the line. Now Woody's got some essentially breaking news to share with us, and he wanted to get it out to SGT Report first. Now Woody, here's my understanding of what you're about to say. Just when we thought that things couldn't get more silly as it relates to these corrupt regulators of these U.S. markets, you're finding that they're even meddling in your own personal professional life, and this time over silver.
Sean, it's great to be with you again, and I have to tell you, the first time I'm going to announce this anywhere, I have joined the Barnhardt parade and given up my federal licenses, and I'm no longer going to be a federally regulated broker because, frankly, the degree of market manipulation, corruption, and fraud in the system as a whole has gotten to a point that is just so unbelievable, it's almost hard to tell people the stuff it is that you're experiencing and for them to believe you because it's so crazy. But really the last straw has occurred for me in recent months where it has literally been made clear to me that federal regulators consider any registered person, any broker who would even answer a question from any member of the public, whether they're a client or not, about the advisability of owning physical silver, or answer a question about where they could acquire physical silver, either on eBay or through a pawn shop or through a website like APMEX or any of the other reputable national dealers or even at a flea market. That is now viewed by federal regulators as the recommendation of an unlicensed security. And when I first kind of got the opportunity to read a letter that involved this, what I considered to be intimidation, I just was like, yeah, you know what? Banks may be too big to fail, but this is too stupid for me to continue to participate in. The great thing about when you've spent 33 years in the system, you can find other interesting ways to serve people which don't involve, these really regulatory fascists who have really taken securities regulation and devolved it down to thought police. If it is literally a civilian person can answer the question, yes, I think it's a good idea to buy silver, and yes, you should go to this website or go to the pawn shop or eBay and buy it. But a regulated person, regulated by an SRO that's not even a government agency and is clearly unconstitutional, for those folks to say, you have no First Amendment, you cannot say that because we consider that. I just thought it was very, very strange that it was particular about silver, and I think there's definitely an effort by regulators to intimidate any broker who would suggest that people consider silver as a safeguard to the collapse of the paper system. I would say if this was a hockey game, I would have dropped my gloves and bloodied their nose, but that was not one of the options, so I just said what Johnny Paycheck once said, take this job and shove it.
Okay, let's dig into this just a little bit before we move on. I want to talk to you about the JP Morgan derivatives blow-up, and I also want to talk to you about the Facebook IPO because I think you've got some interesting insights there. But just to back up, are you telling me that because you're licensed, you got a letter basically asking if you'd ever recommended silver to anybody, and if you did, that was some sort of violation? They don't want licensed investment advisors to be telling people that they should maybe consider some physical silver or gold for protection against this economic collapse that's coming?
I'm going to say that the documents that I got were not that specific, but the conversations I've had and follow up with them absolutely are. And I have, I remember being a small kid on a playground and what it was like when a bully came up to you and started to push you around, and that was exactly the way it is that felt. I have absolutely no doubt that the communication was a result of past videos it is that I've done where I've talked about this quite openly. Silver is not a security in any way, shape, matter, or form. It is money, and people who have money in retirement plans or money in other paper accounts absolutely should be preparing their lives for the sum of all fears, and one of those preparations is to have physical bullion, to have silver, to have gold, and as a part of their kind of safety valve in case the system collapsed. And the idea that anybody would ever come to me directly or indirectly and say, that's a violation of federal law and, we could potentially fine you or worse for that, my response was, you got to be kidding me. And if that's what the system has devolved down to, it's not a hockey game. I can't punch in the nose, so I'm out.
Okay, Woody, so basically you're taking a page from the Ann Barnhardt playbook and you're saying no to this system. Good for you. Let's talk about this JP derivatives loss. Now, CNN is reporting that it's up to $7 billion. Originally, Jamie Dimon had said $2 billion. It's no longer $2 billion. It's likely much, much higher. This Ponzi scheme is just clearly coming down at this point, isn't it?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. My first thought is that if they lost $5 billion, who won? Because the nature of these kind of synthetic derivatives is if somebody loses, somebody else wins. But I think a bigger issue when you look at this is it reminds me of an old Willie Nelson song, what's the word of a liar worth? I have no idea whether it is, if they say they've lost $2 billion, $5 billion, or $10 billion, whether it's really true or they're playing possum in the middle of the road. They're setting us up for some new taxpayer bailout of JP or other banks. The way that we were set up in the bailouts back in 2008. So it is literally a moment for people like me where you feel like a Russian peasant during the Cold War. You read what Pravda says, and the only thing you know for sure is that isn't the truth. Whatever it is they're telling you is not the truth. It's very, very interesting to see someone who is as arrogant as Jamie Dimon do a mea culpa when, he was so anti any kind of government regulation. But I think for every kind of individual investor, the thing that most of them really need to do to understand the whole JP Morgan thing is, look at what Matt Taibbi did about Bank of America and Rolling Stone. If you start to read and understand what these guys have their fingers into, they're not too big to fail. They're just too corrupt to exist. And the best thing that we can do as a country is break them up into 1,000 pieces and bury them in a hole and put cement over it. Because these are literally set up like crime families that are basically designed to loot people. The most interesting JP Morgan effect, I think, may be, is we've all heard that the SEC and FINRA and even the FBI is now in their offices. And from the day that news was out that federal regulators were in their offices, and I started to wonder, well, are they in the offices of other big banks? Because in the past 5 days, the financial markets have traded in a more organic way than I have seen in 3 years.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up Matt Taibbi's article and his investigative research. It's also interesting that you made reference to the mafia. I want to read this. This is from page 20 of the Overstock.com lawsuit, from which basically Matt Taibbi has taken his most recent information, which shines light on Goldman's naked short selling, which they're very embarrassed about because it's completely illegal. Let me read this to you. This is the testimony of Mark Cohodes, the managing partner of one of the largest short-selling clients, Copper River Partners. I think Goldman Sachs is like the mob. Question, and are you referring to them in particular or them and the rest of the market altogether? Answer, I think Goldman Sachs is a racketeering entity that does whatever they can to make a dime without conscience, thought, foresight, or care about ramifications. I think they are cold-blooded and could care less about the law. That's my opinion, and I think I can back it up. Everybody in the world is now waking up to the fact that Wall Street is crooked and this system needs to collapse under its own weight. And I personally think that the $5 billion in derivatives, to your point, we can't believe anything they say, it could well be, could be far more than $7 billion.
It could be $100 trillion, it could be nothing.
Yeah, the Ponzi is collapsing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it certainly appears that way. And I have to tell you, I think the best evidence that the manipulation is starting to fail is the Facebook IPO. For 24 hours before the Facebook IPO, all we heard about is how it could double and how it could close at $100 a share. That morning on Good Morning America, they were acting like it was going to open at $75 a share. It never even got above 50, and this morning, at this moment, it's trading at $33.65. So the fact is that all the king's horses and all the king's men in lamestream media manipulation, trying to get the average investor on the street to buy into this so it would pop up to, 50, 75, 100, whatever, before it fell back down to where I think it should be, which is well below 30 and maybe even below 20. This was a massive case of propaganda that totally failed. Obviously, with all the media publicity it had and people talking about very, very high numbers, the public just didn't bite because people who fundamentally looked at this understand that Facebook has some problems that could kill it dead within 5 years in terms of privacy and other things. The idea that this was worth $100 billion or $200 billion with a company we really don't fully know what their earnings or what the value of this is going to be on time. To me, this was a great victory in the InfoWars because it showed how many people weren't fooled by the obvious propaganda. I think it's a great sign for the future.
Well, I think that's a very insightful way to look at it, Woody, because, I mean, we know the underwriters were in there, I think, all day on Friday trying to support that $38 price. And how much money did the underwriters have to throw at that thing to keep it there? And now we look at it today, they're losing the battle. So to your point, the propaganda is no longer working. But I don't think the propaganda is working across the board as it relates to vaccines, as it relates to weapons of mass destruction, as it relates to these endless unconstitutional wars, and as it relates to Wall Street.
And you know what? There's a massive awakening going on through the country. You can see it in lots of little kind of different places. One of my favorite ones recently is how well these shows on cable TV, the Doomsday Preppers and the Doomsday Bunkers shows were, and how popular it is. They were how popular the gold mining shows are that show people have interest in precious metals. So I think Hillary Clinton is right. There is an information war, and the establishment is losing. And this Facebook is the latest bookmark. And how it is winning. And I talk to people all the time, and just kind of regular folks on the street. I am really surprised how many of them are gradually starting to wake up, and that there's going to be huge societal change in this country in the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it right now. I mean, look at CNN's numbers. They just reported recently that I think they had 39,000 viewers tune in for their 9 p.m. broadcast. It's just a disaster. So fortunately, these mainstream media mockingbird sources are losing the battle, and that's all we can hope for is a great awakening, and I think it's happening.
Well, you know, when all the singing and dancing shows start to get bad ratings, I think at that point in time, I'll be a little more comfortable in declaring victory. But in the meantime, there's lots of work to do. That's
a good point. There's still a lot of bread and circuses out there. Well, you're absolutely right about that. Well, Woody O'Brien, thanks for the update. We really appreciate it. And any last words of wisdom for people as we see these silver markets still down there in very viable territory? $28 for an ounce of silver is a great deal, in my opinion.
Just to say that every time I'm on SGT Report, I get hundreds of emails and messages through Facebook, Woody O'Brien, or through my website, abolishfiatslavery.com. Love to hear from people, and I answer every email personally. It may take a couple days for me to get there, but love to hear from people and get individual questions that people have.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Woody. Everybody can check out abolishfiatslavery.com for more of Woody's stuff.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Much more to come, and visit sgtreport.com for all the latest.